So I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Cape Town, where the focus of my Bachelor of Sciences was in microbiology and biochemistry. I then went on to do my PhD in clinical sciences and immunology, and the focuses of the PhD was really on infectious diseases with a primary focus on TB. And since then I've moved on to doing work with both HIV and TB. It's driven by my passion to make a difference in people's lives. In particular, I feel Africa is ravaged by many infectious diseases. So I really wanted to contribute that and to be able to equip people with the tools to prevent getting these infectious diseases such as TB, HIV, and malaria. I found out about these granules from a colleague who was working on developing these granules. And I thought it was a really great initiative because I could see the potential of how this would impact many infectious diseases. So how these granules work is that because they're a lattice structure, they have holes within them which allow for air to flow through them. And when this air flows through these granules, it releases chlorine dioxide. And chlorine dioxide has been shown in multiple studies to be effective against killing many pathogens, including bacteria and viruses. And in fact, for many years now in many countries, chlorine dioxide has been used to treat water to make it safe for drinking, as well as for treatment of sewerage to remove any infectious diseases that may be in sewerage. So it's been shown and has a long history of being effective against many pathogens. Basically, these chlorine dioxide granules, when the chlorine dioxide gets into any bacteria or viruses, it actually works directly on the RNA that is within these pathogens, causing that RNA to break down. And we know that RNA is the building block for all the proteins that are needed by bacteria and viruses to survive. So by killing that or breaking down that RNA, these viruses and bacteria are unable to survive and are immediately killed. One of the great things about chlorine dioxide is that there is no resistance. So in the world, we're seeing more resistance to antibiotics, which have been the go-to for treating bacterial infections. And therefore, we're seeing this increased resistance. With chlorine dioxide, bacteria are unable to mutate and therefore become resistant against chlorine dioxide. So that is definitely one of the key features that really makes chlorine dioxide and these granules in particular stand out as an effective preventative method. The mutation rate of viruses is mainly driven by a mechanism called proofreading. Proofreading ensures that mutations are minimized, and most viruses actually do not have a proofreading mechanism. So proofreading is, if you can imagine it, it's a way of telling you if you're reading something correctly. And in the case of HIV, influenza, they do not have proofreading mechanisms, and therefore they mutate much faster than what we're seeing with SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2, we know, has a proofreading mechanism, and by having that mechanism, the mutation rate is actually much less than what we see with HIV and influenza. So these chlorine dioxide granules can have a major impact on everyday life. For example, when one is wearing it, you're giving the power to the individual to prevent themselves from getting infected. But they could also be incorporated into spaces that house multiple people, or into conference centers where by dispersing it in the air through mechanisms such as air handling units, we're able to ensure that we're sanitizing the air and prevent lots of infections, and particularly in times such as in winter, where we see there's a spike in influenza infections. So it really has the potential to give the power to the individual to protect themselves. So we know that the chlorine dioxide granules release very low concentrations of chlorine dioxide. These low levels or these low concentrations of chlorine dioxide are enough to do damage to bacteria and viruses. But because human cells are so large, this low concentration does not allow for the accumulation of chlorine dioxide in human cells, and therefore they cannot damage it. On top of that, human cells have the capabilities and the mechanisms to actually break down chlorine dioxide to compounds that are used every day. So chlorine dioxide would be broken down to sodium chloride, which our cells use just for proper functioning of cells in our bodies. And because of this, these low concentrations of chlorine dioxide cannot really harm human cells and therefore are safe for humans. So instead of waiting to depend on getting a vaccine, for example, now where we have this pandemic, by having people have this extra tool, this extra layer of prevention by using these chlorine dioxide granules, it really helps as well in buying time for other mechanisms to be developed. So overall, you see this as part of a suitcase of tools that people can use on an individual level to protect themselves and to prevent infections. Yes, I think definitely. So we've shown, like in a recent experiment, and this is preliminary, that these granules are actually still effective beyond the 90-day mark. So 4 months later, we had these granules which we had opened, and they showed, you know, effectiveness against killing bacteria, which is really like encouraging. And I think one of the things as well for the future is to develop these granules such that the longer that they last, it will really be a benefit to everybody. And I think already we're very excited to see that beyond 90 days, we're still seeing these granules being effective.